Cassandra, I like your braid.
Thank
Your braid
you.
is very cute. Yes.
Thanks. I haven't had much sleep, but I think I still look good because of the braid. I will go live on Facebook, which will happen any second. Okay. So that is happening. And now I'll mute everybody, but you will be able to unmute yourself, so don't stress too much. And Mark, you have to unmute yourself, but then you're good to go.
And I am, and I have. I can't tell you how delighted I am today on the 93rd Lit Balm show to welcome Mary Jo Bang, Charles Forte, Kate Gale, and Fred Marchant as our features today. And before we get to that, we do our little Scottish jig, which is I read something and Cassandra reads something. So I'm going to introduce Cassandra. Cassandra is an award-winning writer, scholar of prose poetry, and professor of writing and literature in Melbourne, Australia. Her most recent books of prose poetry are Pre-Raphaelite, Leftovers, and Fugitive Letters. She's currently writing a book of prose poetry on the atomic bomb with funding from the Australia Council. Cassandra co-wrote Prose Poetry, an introduction, which came out with Princeton U Press, and the Anthology of Australian Prose Poetry. Cassandra's commissioning editor for Westerly magazine.
I'm going to read a short piece. So we had an anthology here where we had to start with the lines, it must be. So this is my It Must Be piece. It must be 2019 because we're in the Hiroshima Prince Hotel and you're standing your toast on its side so it doesn't get soggy with heat. We're late to breakfast, just edging in before 10 o'clock. My hair a wild copper nest. You like your omelets wet with eggy juice, but I prefer miso soup and 3 silver pieces of smoked mackerel. Later, we'll walk through Hiroshima Peace Park, sun warming the wide brim of my hat, and you'll take my hand in silence. After I pour a tomato sauce heart on your plate, you call me your coddled egg, and we go back to our room. You straddle me in the blue of the Seto Inland Sea. I roll you onto your side and map the irregular coastline down your spine. So I would like to introduce our wonderful Oh Captain, My Captain, Mark Vincennes, who is an Anglo-Swiss American poet, a fiction writer, a translator, an editor, publisher, designer, multi-genre artist and musician. He has published over 20 books of poetry, including more recently, A Brief Conversation with Consciousness, There Might Be a Moon or a Dog, which is just out from Gazebo in Australia, 39 Wonders and Other Management Issues, forthcoming from Spite and Dival, and The Pearl Diver of Iranmani, forthcoming from White Pine Press. An album of music, ambience and verse, Left Hand Clapping, is forthcoming from Tree Torn Records. Vincennes is also, I know the regulars know this, a prolific translator who's translated from the German, Romanian and French. He's published 10 books of translations, most recently Unexpected Development by award-winning Swiss poet and novelist Klaus Mertz with White Pine in 2018, and it was a finalist for the 2016 Cliff Becker Book Prize in Translation. His translation of Klaus Mertz's selected poems, An Audible Blue, is forthcoming in September from White Pine Press. He's currently working on a novel, which is brilliant, entitled The Age of Occasions. Vincennes is editor and publisher of Mad Hat Press and publisher of New American Writing. Everyone join in. He's lived all over the world, from Brazil to China to Iceland to India. He was born in Matilda Hospital on the Peak in Hong Kong, but he now lives on a farm in rural Western Massachusetts overlooking Herman Melville's Greylock Mountain, and where, drumroll, there are more hickory hair streaks, bog coppers, and silver bordered fritillaries than people. Mark, you outdid yourself this morning. I know it must be difficult Googling all manner of things that live around you in Massachusetts.
Well, I was very impressed that you pronounced fritillary as well. You know what all those 3 things are, by the way?
No idea.
Butterflies.
Oh, that's very Nabokovian of you.
Exactly. and as is which I'm about to read right now, which is called Approximately. A lizard, a Spanish gecko, dances across the ceiling. How does it feel to be upside down all the time? Why don't you pop a moth or two, then contemplate quantum time? And in line with the prescribed procedures pursuant to the Geneva Convention, and each anterior to the concord of this and that, the dividing line between once was then, there was before. How does it feel to be upside down all the time? At night, a barn owl makes her move, casting out, flying low. You see how her feathers bunch together when she goes in for the kill. Woe to be a lemming or a vole, once we were. Behind the wall, they do it another way. They say, "What's in a lizard to you?" in their coy way. Follow the Spanish dancer down the street in the moonlight. Don't you see? Anything can explode like a star. In between the hours of writing and reading comes music, the film, then that thrill of the chase, if the moon will, or in another way over the hill in greener pastures, circling the mounds of the ancestors. And at any open gate, you stare down inside the compound looking for what? Your soul? Another side of the lizard from the belly upward is that instinctual thing that guides you toward the light. The rush of bodies down in the latter half of town, all consuming their dreams for a penny or two, and over there at the Chinese takeaway, his hands full of trinkets. A detective slurps sesame noodles, a postman wipes his hands, a prosecuting attorney defends his chop suey, his choice of sauces, and over there at the sushi bar, a gamekeeper and her friends divide a single portion of California rolls with extra wasabi. Don't hold on the mayonnaise. And under the awnings in hermetically sealed containers, precisely where we sip coffee, a lizard cools himself in the shade. At night, the spiders come out to spin their webs of intrigue, the moths and flies drawn to the light, to the flickering phosphor, to the warmed walls of humanity scattered everywhere. That's why the lizard won't budge a hair. And did I mention the raccoons emerging from the overhead lairs, dancing late at night or early in the morning, feasting on sticky rice and flecks of ground pork and popcorn, on peanuts, on the dregs of the policeman's coffee, on the styrene spun into a flip top, handy resalable containers, and watch the mother file in with her kids in an orderly row through the bathroom window, which was so conveniently held ajar the night before by a wad of double mint gum. Just like us, they like things in straight lines, coordinated and color-coded. As a matter of moral philosophy, I generally take these things personally. I like to live up to all my expectations. And now I am delighted to introduce Mary Jo Bang, who is the author of 8 books of poems, including A Doll for Throwing and Elegy, which received the National Book Critics Circle Award, a translation of Dante's Inferno, illustrated by Henrik Drescher, and a translation of Purgatorio. Mary Jo teaches at Washington University in St. Louis. Her book of translations of poems by the German poet and novelist Matthias Goeritz, Colonies of Paradise, is forthcoming from Tri-Quarterly Books in October. Welcome, Mary.
Thank you so much, Mark, and thank you for introducing me, and thank you for inviting me, and to Cassandra as well, and to my fellow readers. It's a real pleasure to gather on in the ether on a Saturday. So I'm going to read some poems that are new poems that I've been working on. It's a series of ekphrastic poems that take as their conceit the Virgin Mary, because she and I have a lot in common. One is our name, and the other is that we were both teenage brides and had boys, sons, who died in their 30s. So each of the poems, it takes inspiration from a painting, and this one from The Annunciation by Botticelli. It's called The Announcement. A bird came to see me once, a talking magpie that said, "This will happen," And I didn't so much agree as think, why me? It was arbitrary as far as I could see, ordinary, being at hand and being asked to do whatever needs doing, steadfast as a tattoo that can't be washed off. A castle that isn't mine reminds me that this was not my idea, especially considering how inevitable death is, the way it falls like a cascading drape from the waist to the floor, a soft door that works hard to keep the world out and the mind behind it quiet. I stayed with the clock ticking away, calling attention to itself and to half-finished bridges and lilies and floor-length dresses that mess with one-point perspective, and confessionals where men tell men their stories. Someone had to be used to exalt the idea of women who submit, a girl who would agree to say it was an angel. And this is inspired by a painting, The Madonna and Child, with Saints Louis of Toulouse and St. Thomas, with the donors who commissioned the painting, and it's by David Diado. Okay, mother and child. She looks half asleep. The baby has a crooked smile and a roll of fat at each ankle, and more where his torso branches and his thighs begin to drift. Between the thighs, a see-through drape blurs the line and seems to say, guess which sex I am. The eye meets the pomegranate, a symbol of I'll be back, but not like this. At me too is so far in the future that no one can see it. The foreground couple are the donors. It's easy to see that the woman has been made to cover her hair, but the man, he's wearing his hair and his eyebrows are raised in a way that says he's surprised to be caught watching. One saint seems sad, the other thoughtful. There are so many ways to be in the world of women and men, countless highlights, one for every second. The virgin birth by the girl who slept in the temple at night, the headless cat that claimed it could see, the docent angels who, for $1 or $2, will take you through. I went. I didn't ask who invented the lie. I didn't have to. Backstage, I could hear a pope and a priest laughing. And apologies to any listeners who are true believers. I don't know what else to say. These are also about, all women. So not just Mary, she's the foil for these. This is based on The Virgin and Child by a follower of Roger van der Weyden. It's called The Mary. Fully awake, but God only knows what she's thinking. The baby's dressed, sure, but in a wrap that looks like a Roman toga gone wrong. The baby's fleshy neck suggests a congenital goiter, the result of an inborn error. It's not unlike the butterfly the baby is pinching, in that it was once something else, a cocoon concealed about to be, an anomaly. The future is already formed. She's waiting to find herself in it. Maybe she's thinking, don't look back and don't look forward. Good luck with that. She's no Buddha. The Buddha is dead. The thing she must know is this: you can pray all you want. Maybe she is praying in vain for a plot twist to get her out of this. And this is paired with El Greco's The Immaculate Conception. Immaculate. I didn't imagine it would be like this. Day, a thread that turns into ink at night and sinks in an ocean of inverted brainwaves. Someday I'll no longer be having thoughts, which is fine with me. No more failure, no more humiliations of the flesh. Last night I dreamed I lost my shoes, but got on a bus. When I was too far gone to go back, I got off. The driver drove away. That was that, I said to the tree standing next to me. I guess I'm lost. Then a child arrived, dressed as a dove, with a feathered cape that made it part child, part bird. That one was crying and stopping, then crying again. Every time it cried, a halo of baby faces framed the light, right where my lost mind was staring at air. And this is the Madonna of Chancellor Rolland by Jan van Eyck. The Red Mary. The book is open, so someone is learning. Outside is everywhere I've ever been. Men I met, women I loved, mountains, cities, rivers. You can tell by his eyes the baby didn't sleep well. The venom of the world isn't evident since the church's purse was painted out. I learned over time the ashes of the dead that sit on a shelf can talk to you forever. And this one is paired with Madonna by Salvador Dali. Madonna. Dali makes us faceless, which is true to life. Here, Dali is God. He makes the baby look like me and I look like a whirlwind wrapped in an enormous blanket. Juno's chariot was thought to be drawn by enormous peacocks. If I were a goddess, I would be immortal. I don't know that that would be better than dying. You'd have to keep waking up just to go back to sleep. It might begin to feel like too much. Peacocks are said to have the eyes of Janus in their tail feathers. People are very gullible. They say I'm the perfect woman. No one is perfect. Our faces will all be erased. And this goes with a Piero della Francesca called Madonna El Parto, meaning the pregnant Madonna. Unplanned is more or less than expected. I'm not sure why I have to wear this color. Lapis lazuli blue is such a cliche. At least I look my age, already 12. I've lived here since I was 3, sitting on the knee of one priest or another, sleeping at the foot of the bed of one man or another, awake playing the lapdog, the dancer, the girl with a red stork bite birthmark, a book balanced on my head. Now I'm larger than life, certainly larger than the angels. They look like Advent calendar cutouts. I envy the angel's red socks. I envy every angel, its freedom. I wish I could leave this child inside me and move forward where I wanted to be before it arrived uninvited. The mountains, the sea, it wouldn't matter. Somewhere where I wouldn't have been forced to give away the childhood I could have had to a baby that came more or less from someone whose warm breath on my neck I wasn't allowed to say no to. And this one is not a religious painting. It's a Smelt Brook Falls by Marsden Hartley, 1937, but somehow it got swept in to this series. It's called The Assumption. The artist Marsden Hartley supposedly said, "I love falling water. No lake or pond can give me what a waterfall can." Can't that go without being said, or if said, not quoted, as if it's the secret to a long life whispered on a deathbed? The upheaval of a falling wall of water has more drama than a duck pond or a monochromatic Lake Erie. What I'd like to know is how to be that dramatic, how to let my blue dress meet the fire coming closer and yet not burn up completely. My blue dress or wool scarf or red sweater, or my skin melting into the heat of a last day on earth. Even now, I'm aware of the air stirring the trees, the birds becoming a shimmering, living satin fabric, a few separating off, their terrible stings, the bandaged after. I think that's enough. Thank you so much.
Thank you a million times, Mary. What rhythm. Next, we hear Charles Forte, who's the author of 6 books of poetry and 10 chapbooks. The Town Clock Burning, We Did Not Fear the Father, We Did Not Fear the Father, from Carnegie Mellon Contemporary Classic. Trilogy, Darville, which is prose poems. Frankenstein Was a Negro, prose poems. Mrs. Belladonna's Supper Club Waltz, new and selected prose poems. Charles's work appears in 48 anthologies, including the Best American Poetry of 2001, 2003, and 2016. He's an emeritus distinguished university professor at the University of Nebraska at Kearney and founder of the Wendy Fort Foundation Theater of Fine Arts. He has completed 403 villanelles, and his forthcoming novel is called The Last Black Hippie in Connecticut. Welcome, Charles.
Thank you. Can you hear me? I think I'm muted.
No, you're good.
No, you're good.
Oh, I'm fine.
Yeah, you sound good.
Well, thank you, everyone. I'm going to begin with poems about my 2 daughters. Prose poem for Claire Forte, born January 7th, 1985, 3:23 a.m. Winter brings my late wife a child, and your birth arrives with the morning tide, like wings alive in a jar. The sunflower seeds and thorns bloom in your hands, Claire, and we walk in the mist and draw circles in the sand. I read your palms like a map, and there are small islands and mountain roads rising in your summer eyes. Is my daughter the dancer, actress, artist, gifted in language, song? I search the form and proper length to write one impossible verse to place into your hand. The unspoken metaphor falls like a meteor into this simple throne of time I built for you. And your birth arrives with the morning tide, like wings alive in a jar. For 2 daughters, I have 2, for Claire and Shelley. There is no history in their eyes as they tap the lilac drum and birch, roll out the silver necklace into a straight line over the stone and open wound. The light brown yet darker daughter sits on the father's back porch and reads a poem to the brown yet whiter one under his arms. There is no history in their eyes, only the ancestral trick light pulling the cart out of the mud and war with mules, peasants, and slaves. There are 1,000 metaphors of father's fortune in their eyes. A hollow star, broken wheel, caboose, wild horse, wings over a blue pond. Their father's pen replaces the hollow star with a broken wheel and drops a whistle on the train as wild horses graze and stare at the wings above the blue pond. There is no history in their eyes, only 2 daughters in the backyard, hidden under the cellar door. This is their evening of metaphor. This is a poem that I created based on a scar I have on my wrist. You probably can't see it, but it's shaped like a heart. No tattoo, but a shape is a scar. Valentine. When we met, I was half in love with you. You gave me your breath, and I gave you my own. My heart-shaped scar was your Valentine, a flask of black whiskey, moon tea, and brewer's yeast. You gave me your breath, and I gave you my own. We walked under the arc of human color, and you held my arms as if you never wanted to let go of this needful, widowed man. When we met, I was half in love with you. You gave me your breath, and I gave you my own. Years writing from the light of my body, I finally sent you my last book of poems. You danced without music or men, as train wheels made the buffalo stampede and jumped their bright hula hoops of desire. When we met, I was half in love with you. You gave me your breath, and I gave you my own. Years ago, when I was a lad professor, I was commissioned to write a poem for a women's conference at the University of North Carolina, Wilmington. A prayer for women. Perhaps born to red clay and thatch made her more than man. A string of pearls would not come alive nor lengthen her dreams. Perhaps for blood, the pale tree of knowledge gave itself to her. The shadows of breast on the cave were for the grace of man. Her children came out of her belly like starfish arms clinging to a round stone. She carried her daughter and she walked her son to the shore. Perhaps she gathered them like falling money in a cracked jar. Perhaps she let them go, drowned them, stood naked before the moon and stars in reunion with the sea. Perhaps they were the black faces found buried in the ghost towns of South Africa. The white hands holding baskets of bread and wine found smoldering in the bogs of Europe. The yellow curled feet found on the mud farms of Asia, the brown legs spread apart by the rat-headed men, rising with each flag of this world. This is the title poem from my first book, The Town Clock Burning. The clock positions each of us in one square block behind the church. Nothing has counted more. And year after year, we march as it tells us to march. This half-sleeping clock falters, its pendulum craves motion and time. As powder and flame shadow each face, we guard what it tells us to guard. Does this half-stepping helmsman know how a holy war begins? What bell-shaped terror, what moan, what hour we stop when it tells us to stop? This is the clock of boundaries, marking its descent as its final seconds pass into history. And without pause, we harm what it tells us to harm. Next is race war. I have lines from Tennyson's In Memoriam, lines 15 and 16. And Dante's Infernal references. But anyway, race war. We are carnal sinners blown about forever, like hell propers Halo and Francesca. We are face to face. We are reaching out, but we are not alive anymore. Nothing like love here tonight between races that moan, rocks that rise, and the kindness that wounds and aches and whimpers. This is a moment in history that refuses to sit still, and our hands become great serpents in a battle without victory. In this town we live, we exchange blows on our shapeless faces until our eyes meet like playmates in a meadow. We are children of circumstance, slave ships and reckless stars, and there are a few hours left in this world that we may rise on stepping stones, taking our dead selves to higher things. We lead each other away from each other, odd and sightless creatures. This moment is against us, ripe and cunning. Earth is not sufficient, and Earth is our only companion. There's three more. collection. This is my title poem from another new and selected poems. We did not fear the father. We did not fear the father as the barber who stood like a general in a white jacket with a green visor cap. For 6 long days, he held a straight razor like a sword until his porcelain chrome chariot became a down-home chair. The crop-eared son learned to see how a working man's day job after the night shift filled the son's small pockets with licorice, filled the offering plate, and paid for the keeper who clipped our grapevines under his own pageant. We did not fear the father as landlord in our 3-story tenement who took charge of 4 apartments and the attic dwellers. We searched each corner of the dirt cellar for a fuse box while he broke apart plasterboard upstairs with a sledgehammer. We peeled out paper from wire mesh and read the headline news, a century old, before he lifted us like birds into our bunk beds. We did not fear the father until he entered the tomb of noise for his night job, shaping molten steel into ball bearings as we stared into the barbed grate where he stood before the furnace, sending smoke into the trees. Fear became the 8-hour echo and glow inside his skull, the high-pitched metal scraping our ears as our provider left the factory floor with oil and sawdust inside his mouth and punched out as the fermented daylight burned his eyes. We did not fear the father until he stooped in the dark. This deals with incident with the mother and daughter I observed at a cafe. The daughter was weeping and the mother was crying. It was dementia, Alzheimer's. This poem came from that. One had lived in a room and loved nothing. One had lived in a room and loved nothing, full of spiders and what memory remained. One had loved and she had forgotten things. Clock stopped, an aeroplane lost in the dark. And who was that voice on the telephone? One had lived in a room and loved nothing. It was a rare sleep in helter-skelter. One awakened a half-blessed and charmed fool. One had loved and she had forgotten things. One had lived in a room and loved nothing, left alone in her wedding gown and throne. Who gave her a mantis kiss as jazz played? The faceless lover and last known address, a writing pad and table overturned. One had loved and she had forgotten things. What was day or night with no hours left? And who were the two in the photograph? One had loved and she had forgotten things. One had lived in a room and loved nothing. I'll end with another villain now, one of far too many. I can't look at one. I can't write another one, but another lifetime. This is for Miles Davis. He drank Molotov, Riptide, Moonshine rum. He drank Molotov, Riptide, Moonshine rum. Villanelle libretto, half note divine. Swallowed fire and fell in love with cool. He flew to Paris with a Russian Jew, his feathered oracle of desire. He drank Molotov, Riptide, Moonshine rum. What kind of blue was lost a century tied to a dove's charred wing, canary wild? He swallowed fire and fell in love with cool. He drank Molotov, Riptide, Moonshine rum, composer, arranger of the heart's debris. What kind of flower are you? Bitches brew. Swallowed fire and fell in love with cool, mortal black and blue, wailing lavender. He blew a honey dripper bebop scat. Double bass strings flared above the trees, sweet chariot, bitter quince, ghost ladder. He drank Molotov, Riptide, moonshine rum, swallowed fire, and fell in love with cool. Thank
Thank you so much, Charles. Who doesn't fall in love with cool at some stage, you know? Particularly when they're young.
The only word is cool is the only word that survived the 50s, I think.
Thank God. That's
Thankfully.
some of the new expressions they use. Geez, cool is, you know, it's got that
Cool.
mixy thing, crackly, you know, it's kind
Your hat, your pork pie hat is very cool.
of. Thanks. Thank you so much, Charles. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And yeah, we'll be talking about other stuff, of course, soon.
Yeah.
Here's Dr. Kate Gale, who is co-founder and managing editor of Red Hen Press and editor of the Los Angeles Review. She teaches in the low residency MFA program at the University of Nebraska in poetry, fiction, and creative nonfiction. She is the author of The Loneliest Girl from University of New Mexico Press and 7 books of poetry, including The Goldilocks Zone from the University of New Mexico in 2014 and Echo Light from Red Mountain in 2014 also, and 6 librettos, including Rio de Sangre, a libretto for an opera with composer Don Davis, which had its world premiere October 2010 at the Florentine Opera in Milwaukee. She speaks on independent publishing at schools, including USC, Harvard, Columbia, and Oxford University. Her opera in progress is The Web Opera, one word, an opera on Che Guevara is in process with Cuban composer Armando Bailo. Her opera on Esther, written for the singer Hilla Plitman, is in process with composer Mark Abel. So lots of music going on, Kate.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to read from my new book, The Loneliest Girl, and I'm going to start with the opening poem, which is There Are 10 Things You Need to Know to Be a Woman, which is based on the 10 Rules of Dueling from Hamilton, which of course is based on the 10 Rules of Crack. When you're young and the little boys say, "Let me see you pee," you need to say no. They want to see under your dress. Bad things can happen. They come for you. When you're in school and the other girls laugh at you because you're dressed like a half-wit, don't expect your mama to care. She'll laugh with her sisters, with her mother. They'll all laugh at you. They are laughing right now. They come for you. When you grow breasts and the boys say they just want to look at them, they don't mean it. They mean they want you to undress. They mean they want to have sex with you and then with someone else and then with someone else and then with someone else. They will tell everyone how easily you slipped off your blouse, unhooked your bra, stepped out of your skirt. You thought it was love. They thought you were easy pickings. They come for you. In college, at the parties, if you have a drink and then another, his penis will slip inside you. And if you have had too many drinks, so many penises will slip inside you. It will be a party of penises inside you, a memory of penises, a throwdown of penises. And you will try to stand afterward. You will try to walk. You will hear them laughing. They come for you. You move to another state and start over. You date doctors and lawyers. You are taken to the country club where the fancy men put their hands on you. They take you to high-rise hotels where they grope you in exchange for dinner. You put out. You are popular. They come for you. You get a job. You ask the women at your company to help you. You want help meeting important people, making connections. The women will not help you with anything. They sew the scarlet A to your blouse. They come for you. You get married and then you get a divorce. You hope the women will invite you to meet their single friends. They do not want you alone with their husbands. They don't trust you with your boyfriends. When you try to talk with their men, they come for you. The only way you could avoid attention is to get fat, but you live in a city where fat is not permitted. For a few years, you let yourself get a little bit fat and you have a few more friends. You have a fat boyfriend. Then you join a gym and lose weight. The women turn on you. They come for you. You could become religious, talk to God, become a Jesus lover or a God follower. And there in church, maybe the other women would like you. The other men would assume you aren't about sex. Don't people pretty much stop having sex once they join a church? You attend church one Sunday. Everyone can see you are a fake. They come for you. You are a motherfucking skinny ass bitch. You've stomped around the world in your life building castles. You've painted the sky and planted trees. You have broken the goddamn rules. And when they wrote new ones, you broke those. You are out of control. You are the wild New Testament of women. You are breaking the 11th commandment, which is, thou shalt not speak if thou art a woman. You are speaking your dirty boots without shame. Where is your shame, woman? Where is your shame? Why do you not hang your head, woman? They come for you. They come for you. They come for you. So, such a cheerful beginning there. So I had a lot of fun with this book. I did a lot of research on Medusa, sort of my patron saint. And this poem is written from the point of view of Medusa, if Medusa had spent a lot of time reading the Bible, especially the 23rd Psalm. Snakes in my hair. I wish I weren't so fat. Beauty would shield me. I wish I made more money. I'd have walls and greenery. I want to be the center of someone's universe. The cave is cold. I want someone to lick me. The walls are wet and slimy. There is no burble in the wood. I'm hungry but dare not eat. All the men in the world are eating pizza, nachos, cheese sandwiches. All the women in the world are eating celery, radishes, lettuce. I want a man to make my heart go wild, like windows in Japan, spring, pink and white petals of morning. This morning I exited the cave, found a machete, severed the snakes, washed my body, anointed my head with oil. Sure, my cups run over. Don't put your hands around my waist, don't even try. Cup my breasts, I dare you. I smell of sweetness. I eat thickets of blackberries all afternoon. Have you ever wished to be transformed? This is that story. You can walk out of the cave into the bright sunlight. The curse is a story. The flowering tree is a story. The wings are a story. Flight is a story. Let there be light is a story. So the story of Medusa that we've all been handed, and the one that we hear the most, is the one where Medusa's head was cut off, and then she ended up with the head full of snakes. And that head full of snakes was used to kill the Kraken. But there's a story before that story. And in that story, the story is that she was raped, and the punishment for her being raped was that she ended up with the head full of snakes. So this is that before story, but I didn't want to leave her there like that. I wanted to give her the agency to change her story, because we all need to change our story. Those who love Medusa. You, Poseidon, came to me in the temple. I laughed at suitors, men in love. You said I was a thing of beauty, a cup for love. You smashed the cup, you poured the wine. In Athena's temple, you raped me on the floor. My eyes met Athena's, she found me guilty. After the rape, I gathered myself in blood. Athena whispered, I curse you. Athena said, you wore red, your skirts rustled, you smiled. Your hair will rustle. Your face will be unforgettable. Your silky hair will be snakes, your voice a hiss. You are creature. Carry this story forward. Rape is the fault of the victim. Carry this story forward. The female turns the key, opens the door. You raped me in the temple. I am that thing. Hold my head aloft. Laugh for generations. Don't stop laughing until Medusa is synonymous with death. Turn me into that thing you fear. Make me monster. Make me creature you fear in the dark. You fear the thing in the dark, wet, ripe, swollen, waiting for pleasure, that thing demanding. Fear the woman with her own snakes. Men kept visiting me in the cave on the island of Sistine. Men kept visiting the cave. It isn't true they all died. Imagine the men who entered the cave, found love in the dark. Imagine the men who braved the forest, found my lips. Imagine the men who found my lips. Okay, two more. I did a lot of studying Greek literature as I was working on this book. And one of the things I found out was that the Greeks believed that when you went into a town, you should kill all the leaders and then you can control the town, something that seems to be happening in the Ukraine. And they call that killing off the tall poppies. So this poem is called Tall Poppy. She walks around with her head in the air like she's somebody. Who is she? She came to town, built a library. Who cares? Who needs a library? We have our own books. We have our own parties. She's never invited me to one of her parties. Well, she invited me once. Once I got there, she never talked to me, never offered me a glass of wine. Her brain must be a crowded little place telling her, you're terrific. She's fallen flat on her face now. She'll be down for a while. I used to think I could help her. I wanted to say, slow down, do what I say, you'll be okay. I wanted to say, keep your head down. In this town, they'll eat you alive. But she kept laughing and marching around like she knew everything. Now that she's flat on her face, I hope she learns her lesson. I hope she learns to keep her mouth shut. She thought she was the tall poppy around here. People like her get their houses burned down. They get stung by a buzz of bees. Their heads are cut off. Goodbye, tall poppy. So I'm going to end with the last poem in the book. I grew up in a cult until I was 18, and then stumbled out to California to go to graduate school. And then I wanted to do something great in California, but instead I ended up starting a publishing company. And so maybe because of that, I never could really afford the therapy I desperately needed. And so instead, I ended up writing a number of poems over the years in which I imagined myself in therapy, and this is one of them. So afterwards, you can feel free to message me and say, this is not at all what therapy is like, Kate, if you've been to therapy, which if you live in New York or LA, you've certainly been in therapy, because everybody else seems to have been to therapy. Stumbling toward grace. Are you thinking of killing yourself? I'm not sure. I don't think so. Would you like to go on living? No one wants me to live. No one. Okay, my husband and children want me to live. No one else. Well, now that you mention it, I have 11 friends who want me to live. 11's a good number, so you want to stay alive for the 11 people. And your husband, and how many children do you have? Technically 2. Why technically? I have 2 stepchildren who are adults. They may want me to live. But your children and husband definitely do. Absolutely, no doubt, I'd swear on it. Of course, sometimes my husband is annoyed with me, but he still wants me to live. Good to hear. He wouldn't want you to end your life. No, it would bum him out quite a bit. He'd cheer up after a few months, of course. He'd be out dating and he'd find someone easier to deal with. Most women are easier to deal with at first, but then we all turn out to be whiners. Of course, so you are going to live? Probably. Things are bad now, but they might get better. And in the meantime, 2 children, 1 husband who's only sometimes annoyed, and 11 friends, and you have a dog. Yes, a great dog, Jasper. I'd stay alive for the dog alone. That is good to hear. So what happened? Can we talk about it? We're supposed to listen and act wisely. I did neither. And then a number of people wanted me dead. I see, but they didn't actually come after you to kill you. No, they just wished me dead. What you want is what matters. I don't know what I want anymore. What did you do to annoy these people? To make them wish me dead? I wanted to be a defender. Instead, I was a heckler. What would you like to do? I have this one life, to build the cathedral of the soul, to rebuild mine like a small chapel, a single flower, a bell, a boat, a slip of paper with one perfect poem, a singular line of prose, knees on the ground planting a row of corn, a trembling ascent of a pyramid, a bird, a grape, a perfectly poured cup of tea. I have my life to work on this single thread. There is unrestrained stupidity and there's grace. In my dreams, I stumble toward grace. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kate. Wonderful. And next we hear from Fred Marchant, who is the author of 5 books of poetry, the most recent of which, Said Not Said, was published by Grey Wolf, and recognized as an honors book by the Massachusetts Book Awards. Fred's first book, Tipping Point, won the 1993 Washington Prize from the WordWorks and was reissued in a 20th anniversary second edition. In addition, Fred has co-translated with Nguyen Ba Chung the work of several contemporary Vietnamese poets and has edited Another World Instead, the early poems of William Stafford. He's also the co-editor with Jennifer Barber and Jessica Greenbaum of Tree Lines, an anthology of contemporary poems about trees, published last month by Grayson Press. Fred's work has appeared in a wide variety of journals, from Agni, Consequence, Maintenant, Plume, and Solstice, to name a few. Fred is an emeritus professor of English and the founding editor of the Poetry Center at Suffolk University in Boston. He continues to teach workshops in such settings such as the Fine Arts Work Center in Provincetown and the Hudson Valley Writers Center. Fred is with Afa Michael Weaver, a co-winner of the May Sarton Award from the New England Poetry Club. This award is given to poets whose work is an inspiration to other writers. Welcome, Fred.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you. Thank you, Cassandra. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, my fellow readers. It's such a privilege and such a joy to hear your work. I'm going to begin with a poem that unfortunately keeps having a life after life. It's called Spell to Stay the Hand. And I wrote it a few years ago, say 4, maybe 5, in response to an extraordinary installation at the Boston Cyclorama. Boston Cyclorama, for those of you not around here, was a 19th century building that was made to present panoramic paintings, especially of battles. And over the years, it's had different transformations. But a group of visual artists and musicians decided to use the Boston Cyclorama and invited poets to join them to think about the word no, N-O. And so the event was called No, No, capital K, N-O-W, et cetera, but No, No. And what they did, aside from the visual art, they projected the poems and one's voice with the poems onto the walls of the cyclorama. As they say, unfortunately, the poem keeps having more than one occasion. Spell to stay the hand. No, not only the word, neither fetish nor totem, not only thought. No, not even feeling, not a face or shadow, not seed on wind. No, not stop signs on fire, not hands held up and up and up. No, not the aim you take down the barrel, not the chamber readied. No, not the clip, not the feet per second a round will travel. No, not fires, not at them, not there at the far end. No, not you, not me, not now, not again, not again. As probably all of you know, the word contrapasso out of Dante, but Mary Jo certainly knows it, and I hope that the explanation is sufficient. It's the way in which Dante imagines punishments that mirror the sins that incur the punishments. Contrapasso. The sun came to me and wanted my friendship. As it is nature, it tries this regularly. But today I looked it directly in the eye and told it to fuck off. I wanted no more of that let there be light business. I wanted darkness on the waters. Let's see what that looks like. Let the whole damned enterprise fail. Let great waves of misery be visited upon us. this land so plagued by thievery and murder, this people that sells its own down every river, this nation that claimed it was the exception. Let us find out what the rest have had to endure, but the punishment be only fitting and just. Turn out the lights, lock up the store, head home and pull down the curtains. Don't even breathe if you still can. There's a hellhound on your trail. Killer eyes, a nose for the way we smell. Sick, as in sickum, derived from seek. Good dog. This is a poem called Anemones, and it's dedicated to George Kovac, the founder of Consequence magazine, now Consequence Forum. George passed away a year or so ago, and but he created a really fine magazine and journal and website. The website itself is spectacular. The sort of study and reflection of the cultures of war and peace and efforts there around those. Unfortunately, this poem has a legacy and genealogy life too. This was begun in response to the Syrian civil war, which of course is deeply connected to the Russian invasion of the Ukraine, and the atrocities thereof seem also emotionally connected, at least to what happened in a couple of days ago in Texas. So, Anemones. Is there anything within heart sight such as this, whose petals have begun to flare and die, whose name means daughter of the wind, whose spidery roots have outgrown the green plastic pot that sat all winter with a flower on the edge, full body, blood red to vein blue soft, flora delicatio, the allure and charm of delicacy, our delight in hoping to live as long as we can, a hope as delicate as what you find in a child without guile, the sort who sweetly disobeys, who romps from the shelter with a smile and into the bombed out street, who comes home covered in chalky blast dust, whose round face is smeared into a mask, under which eyes have widened and will stay that way. The kind of child we all know, will sooner or later get killed. A child someone will notice for a while and then forget. And forget too how easy it is, or was, or ever shall be for a child to die. For anyone or anything to trample or rip out the flower and fling it onto a pile. For each one is only just a flower, and is it not the petal's destiny to die quietly, to fall, like you and me, and yes, like them, the all, the rest, the those, the anemones. The pandemic era sort of coincided in my family's life also with a serious encounter with chronic illness. And so I've spent in the last year lots of time inside of facilities, hospitals and nursing homes in particular. So I've got several poems that are voices emanating out of those hallways. This is called Applesauce, and it has an epigraph from the French poet Eugène Guillevec. And he says, your poem brings us into the world. Applesauce. Mine says, leave me alone. But they come round with applesauce in a spoon so light it could be plastic, but is a thin metal that adds its taste to the puree, whereon 2 pills designed to bring me back to life rest and wait for me to open wide. Pills in pleasing violet, meaning they are extended release. So says the good nurse, to whom I reply, I am trying not to cry. I just want to go back to sleep, go back to my dream, which is now the best part of any day, almost every night. Viscera. I cried out. I was in such fear, I made a rough sign of the cross. Forehead, breast, shoulders. Couldn't help myself. Call me an infant. It was an infant's hour, and I couldn't see or saw only the empty room and knew it would only get worse as the illness took our lives away. And I knew too well to think a God, any God, would save us, or even one of us. As I went down my list, the God of no gods, the God of never there and wouldn't go there, the God in disguise who liked to go ta-da before saving anyone, how my mind raced through each and each a thought, a prayer, in words becoming just air from lungs that would only take in more air, bringing it to the innards of a body that just did not care, and leading it up to a mind that kept looping its reel of what the old king said to his daughter, how from nothing comes nothing, a scene at night, a granite throne room, large, empty, barely lit, a rough cut floor, hard on the knees of the faithful. Vigil. Over at last and gone, the body that was belongs now to no one. Palpable absence, unequivocally arrived. The sheer lack of ambiguity in the moment takes your breath away. You feel almost grateful for what loss might be able to teach you, handing you over, hostage to a regime ruled by the lords of the real. You sit and marvel at how quickly you feel keen admiration for the literal, and how metaphors make you smile as they sneak into your thoughts and seem almost a calculated posture when compared to the dim warmth in the hand you still hold until you place it down gently. Thinking how gently does not matter anymore. And you note the bed rail, the proud embossed medallion. You note the fluorescent that shines upon it and the face that has begun to look like a mask. You think, you imagine, you wish that before the soul floats up and out, it would hover at the sealed window. You hope it wants to touch you once before leaving this airless room where a kindness invited you in and asked if you'd like to have a few minutes alone. I'm going to end on a couple of happier poems. Lilac. Not the tree per se, not the blossom, the scent already gone, but its bark, the limbs entwined, how they glow in late sunlight, are wholly present to the light they need. Only now, these long neglected stems of what we like to call wooden, how they bring the light into what they are. So beautiful they look like an idea of lilac, forming, or a desire, stirring, upward, entwined, but not inseparable. They look like what in this world love is. Photograph. It's a saw-whet owl. It's an owl about this big, and it's in the northern climes, maybe halfway down the country, perhaps has them. And they are not far away from us. And this one was sitting over my shoulder in the back porch of my yard last summer. Saw-whet. Oh yeah, I should tell you that the name is saw, one word, S-A-W, whet, W-H-E-T, and the name comes from the sound of the owl. It's supposed to sound like a saw being sharpened on a whetstone. so wet. You could barely hear it, and when you looked over your shoulder to the roof, tracking the feathery sound, you saw first a small head and banded body, then wings that flared, and you could almost see it say to itself, landing here was a mid-ruffle mistake and a surprise. Well, you, the old inveterate meaning maker, are already thinking, here is the sound death, when it comes, will make, the sigh of someone who's arrived at your door after traveling all night and is glad you are at home and wants and gets to get a good look at you, Or is all this palaver about dying only the easy eeriness of a poem on a humid summer night ripe with ghosts and memory? Maybe this visitor is more like a word that breaks the surface and has come to name the mix of contraries in every feeling. Or maybe it is like an image that wonders how it came to take up residence in you. But perhaps it is a sound barely heard, but real enough for you to know that whatever else it might mean, this is how the next poem might begin. The feather breath of what is small, secretive, and near. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred. A wonderful reading by all. And I'd love to thank all of you guys, especially Mary, of course, Mary Jo, sorry, Charles, Kate, and Fred for this wonderful reading. And just to give you an idea what's still coming up, next week we have a reading to celebrate Marilyn Monroe's birthday, but it's also based on an anthology which came out called I Want to Be Loved by You, Poems on Marilyn Monroe. The reading features a big potpourri of poetry celebrities, including David Lehman, Nina Andrews, Angela Dribbin, Heidi Seaborn, Sebastian Matthews, Robert Anthony Gibbons, C.A. Conrad, Duard Phillip, George Guida, Karen Neuberg, Anne Sefola, Joel Allegretti, Baron Wormser, Marilyn Robertson, Nick Mahoka, Mervyn Taylor, and Susan Erickson, with guest MCs Margot Stever and Susanna H. Case. And the week after that is a British show, which features Martin Figueira, George Sitches, Claire Shaw, and Jessica Mukherjee, with guest MC Helen Ivory. So please join us for those two shows. And now I'm going to hand the mic back to Cassandra to commence with our open mic reading tonight.
Yeah. So don't go anywhere because we've got an awesome open mic. We've got some regs, we've got some semi-regs, we've got some new people. So Ron is up first. What have you got for us this week?
Okay, I'm going to read two short things from my new chapbook of erased poetry. And I want to point out that even though some of the erased poems turn out to have some humor in them, there's no disrespect involved. These are all poets that I'm crazy about. I admire greatly, from Plath to Baraka to Yates and Keats and Nikki Giovanni. But anyway, the first one I'm going to read is by Rabindranath Tagore. This is an erasure of I Will Not Let You Leave. Midday is getting more and more intense. Midday gusts waft an old beggar woman. Her rags shade the banyan tree. Tired slumber stretches a night void of life. In my house, there is no rest. And this is an erasure of The Sorrow of Love by William Butler Yates. The quarrel of the full moon and the sky leaves earth with red, mournful lips. And you tear the sorrows and the burden of the unquiet earth. That's my two.
Fantastic. What a wonderful way to pay tribute to some of your favorite poets and poems. And it's wonderful to hear them with the erasure because it makes them so different and makes us go back to the originals too, I think, I hope. Thank you so much. What a great way to start. Open mic. Next, we have Linda. We know Linda lives down the road from Mark, as I like to say, even though that's not entirely true. But she lives close by, I believe, and she always reads something wonderful when she comes along. So Linda, you're up next. Do we have Linda here still?
You're muted, Linda.
Ah. Unmute Linda, please. You're holding us in so much suspense.
No, I got on another
Yay!
page. Okay. Usually I'm pretty humble about ever talking about anything that's kudos, but I will say this poem I'm reading you is going to be published in the Long Islander because George Wallace asked me to send him something. So
That's awesome. That's awesome.
yeah. So the name of it is not love, but it contains loveliness. An aura surrounds my state of being like a margin without boundaries. It is pure intoxication. There is sunlight, breezes, and the gentle sound of water. It is not love, but it contains loveliness. I feel its caress against my cheek. It mesmerizes like an eternal flame. It is a vibrating presence. Its atmosphere is silvery blue. Instead of clouds, I see feathers aloft. Steady like a continuum, I hear humming. The pitch changes with the volume. I see shapes evolve, then dissolve. I am lifted into a rainbow's arc. I feel wet drops on my hand. It is comforting. I remain in my aura. Neither stupefied nor amazed, I exist with hopes. I will never enter reality again. Thank you.
Wow, that was fantastic. So many good lines. Its atmosphere is silvery blue, and I love the feathers line. What a wonderful contribution. I'm excited to see it in print. Make sure you let us know when we can see it in print.
Okay, thanks.
Next, we have a favorite of ours, John Wessick. No one quite knows what goes on inside his head, but what comes out on paper is pretty fantastic. So, John, you're up.
Thank you, Cassandra. Well, today I have an unpopular opinion to share with you that includes footnotes. So what I will do is I will go over quickly the news events where our government has been complicit with right-wing extremists, and then I will read the poem. Of course, you all know about the police murdering black men. In May of 2020, there was a Boston police sergeant named Clifton McHale who was caught on tape bragging about running over Black Lives Matters protesters. I don't think anything happened to him. Back in 2014, a guy named Cliven Bundy had an armed standoff with federal agents. He'd been running cattle on public land without paying grazing fees. The government tried to impound his cattle, but he and his armed followers pointed guns at law enforcement. Now, if you or I point guns at law enforcement, we'd be undead, but there's a different set of rules for conservatives. In 2016, Bundy's sons Ammon and Ryan took over the Malheur National Wildlife Refuge and demanded that the government turn over public lands. So that's where they could run their cattle on without paying grazing fees. Anyway, the standoff lasted for a month. Ammon and Ryan Bundy were acquitted of all federal charges. Secretary of Defense Mark Esper said former President Trump wanted the army to shoot Black Lives Matters protesters in the legs. Now, there's a femoral artery in your legs, and if you shoot somebody in the leg, they can bleed out and die. To date, the Department of Justice has not charged the coup instigators for the January 16th riots. And also, just this May, the Conservative Political Action Committee, CPAC, they held their meeting in Hungary. Hungary. Now, Hungary is run by a sort of a dictator named Viktor Orban, who is a proponent of the Great Replacement theory. That's like a white nationalist, racist theory here. Okay, so here is now my poem. It's called Democracy is Under Attack. Quick, disarm! Who will protect us when the Proud Boys take over? Flak vests, teardrop glasses, their bodies buff with intimidation. The cops who murder black men, maybe the officer who bragged about running over Black Lives Matters protesters. The feds who fled Cliven Bundy's rifles, a cowboy hat, the only difference between dead on the pavement and a guest spot on Fox News. Who will protect us? The prosecutors who bungled the Mauler takeover trial, the president who wanted the army to shoot protesters in the legs, the attorney general who cowers before the coup instigators, the politicians who bend their knees at CPAC to Viktor Orban's martial laws and Great Replacement theory. Hypocrisy. The government that won't protect us from right-wing extremists demands we surrender the means to defend ourselves. Thank you.
Wow, that was powerful and different for you. I thought that was really stirring. Thank you. Thanks for sharing. I even, the footnotes themselves were powerful, but hearing them in poetry, I always think that poetry can get the word out so much more in its way. It can be quite political. So thank you. DeWitt in his chair, DeWitt in his famous chair, or is it famous DeWitt in his chair or DeWitt in his famous chair? I'm not sure, but he's going to read something for us and it's going to be fantastic. I can tell. DeWitt, can you unmute and give us your poem?
Okay, clear. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm teased by the accidental overlap of the word news with nudes. So this is called fake nudes. Mannequins wait for the window dresser. Dancers wear flesh-colored bodysuits. Is classical ballet ready to embrace flesh-toned tights? Asked Dance Magazine in 2020. Marble statuary, medieval humbling, Renaissance glorification. Breaking nudes. All the nudes fit the print. Airbrushed in Playboy, but not in Penthouse. Want the bad nudes first or the good? For artist model, see Jacques Rivette's The Belle Noiseuse, where Emmanuel Bert is forced to hold poses that defy flesh. It's not about flesh, not about nudity, the artist's wife explains. Compare 80-year-old Lear's off you lendings to King Tut's send-off dressed to the nines. Inflatable sex dolls for the affluent. Professional bodies, topless on South Beach, strippers at work. Nudism itself, insisting that skin is natural, nothing to hide. Shame on squares who stare. Except for the clinical gaze, for health's sake, or airport body scans seeking weapons. And the real? Best recognized with eyes wide shut. One flesh, bared hearts.
Thank you. Shame on squares who stare. I agree. And anything that has a plastic inflatable sex doll in it that you managed to get into a poem is amazing. I don't know how you do it. So much play there, so much to enjoy. And we better follow that up with Cindy, who is incredible. No pressure, Cin. She always does something that everybody loves and gets kind of inspired by. So Cindy, what are you reading for us this week?
Well, DeWitt and John are very hard acts to follow, as with teachers and all the open micers. I'm going to read a prose poem, Cassandra,
Hooray, hooray. Prose poetry should take over the world. You know, I think that.
and it's from my second book, The Carcinogenic Bride, which Bob Heeman did the cover collage for.
He does brilliant covers.
The poem, it was written a long time ago when I wasn't very discreet about who I went out with. Let's say it that way. It's called Overtime, or I Gave at the Orifice. And yes, it was about a boss. What do you call this feverish hour when even the walls are wet with sweat and spackle, when playboys and poets are dropping their clothes and facades in electromagnetic fields, when tongues are winding counterclockwise against the grinding of hearts, and mouths are clinging to the loverless dusk? And what do you call it when morning comes, dressed in a suit, poker-faced against the winking of dawn, and breath returns to calm, and fingers no longer smolder? When all of last night's hunger is best hidden in mundane drawers of briefs and leases, revised and saved under mistress moonlight, when the poet should be nestled tight and warm in plaid pajamas, and the artificial Adonis should be safe in his rightful bed, counting his blessings. Thank you.
Amazing, amazing. Loved it. Always love it. Even love the title of that book, The Carcinogenic Bride, is fabulous. And I will think of plaid pajamas for the rest of the day, especially when I go back to bed after this because it's so early. We have two more and they're great. Susan is next. She's going to read us something that she's been working on, which is fabulous. Susan.
Oh, thank you, Cassandra. I'm going to read a few verses that I wrote down in memory of my beloved Ralph. I've abbreviated it. I've made it shorter because of the time constraint. We are together on our annual spring weekend getaway and drive the same Cape Cod drive to arrive at our preferred Provincetown motel. You park the white Volvo in the vacant lot beyond the droopy netted tennis court and near the paint peeling pool. We step out of the car. A nor'easter's tailwind blows us about as we open the door to enter. Inside, we wait and wait and wait. After endless waiting, two winter-weary young men emerge from nowhere and grudgingly check us in. Smiling our wry urban smiles, we savor their ill-mannered apathy. Then we carry small but book-laden bags down a long blue painted corridor. As though parting the Atlantic Sea, we pass between faded oceanic-themed prints of bad oceanic-themed paintings. As we groan like desert camels from the weight of our cargo, then we unlock the suite. There is no view except for the parking lot, so we close the blinds to shut out the window-framed acre of cracked concrete. This place is a tad run down, but we relish the spaciousness and fully furnished kitchen where, in near darkness, you teach me the miracle of a perfectly boiled egg. Weary from the 3-hour drive from Weston to Cambridge to Provincetown, we plop down on a hard sofa. You unpack your science magazine, McPhee and Salter. I begin to read small press poetry and hoard the NYRB for later. Between chapters and pages, we frolic to sounds radiating from the clangy whistling heater. Under the worn, now warm covers, we leave behind our sighs of love and silly laughter. We drive the same Cape Cod drive, now in reverse, passing drifty bugger dunes, pilgrim plants, dried dune grass, sand trees growing in sand. We are venerable like the sea on this dark, clouded day, wearing our old winter coats. We glance at silver spray, topping dark rolling waves, passing by withered half-Cape houses, the beloved Granny Grays, patterns for new Cape Cod style homes to be built somewhere in the landlocked Midwest. Near the site of the Marconi station, you stop your car beside the road, explaining you can't walk the path. You remark, in Israel one time, I ran away from a lusty Irish actress chasing me, then tripped on a tight wire. Your easy humor is stronger than the knee injury that plagued you for decades. We laugh until we cry, not quite knowing why. And finally I ask, well, did she jump you when you were down? More boisterous laughter. We return to the motel, refreshed for a fine seafood feast, and search for an open off-season restaurant. We choose the one with fine food and cultivated kitsch decor, with thousands of party-colored lights following the lines of architecture and plastic Greek statuary. A large Madonna icon stares out from behind the bar. We marvel at the virgin Jewish girl Hellenized here in Olympian heaven. In honor of Our Lady, we order Peruvian champús, but there's only champagne, and that will do. With drinks on the table, we study the menu in order. Then you recall when you were a toddler on Manhattan Beach, admiring all the coiled Yates while watching colored reflections flickering on the night water in Sheepshead Bay. I watch you entranced as rainbow lights dance across your mirthful child face and realize again how much I love you. As I turn away from the mid-Cambridge garden, I hear the fading sounds of our endless chatter and walk toward my apartment alone. Aching while cleaving to early March buds, emerging in green in thin stripped dirt gardens, I weep. Then I swear when April flowers bloom, I will pull them out of the ground.
Wow, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing. I know it's still so raw, but it really makes
Yes, but it was wonderful having those memories. I really loved.
absolutely. I do love the perfectly boiled egg, but that might just because I'm an egg person. It's a great moment. We have our last person on open mic. I've saved him up because we love a bit of Bob, and Bob's going to bring home the open mic with something wonderful that we'll remember for the rest of the day and go about our lives being a little bit changed. Bob.
Okay. This is new. Displaced in time, he sleeps during, without ever entering the summer shadow. His last arms, the direction he must, even though he is not granted permission.
Love it. Displaced in time. I think that's a comment on your amazing sleeping patterns. Like I said, I think you need to be in Australia because you're always asleep during the day and awake during the night.
Well, that was the beginning of it.
I loved it. Great
Thanks.
way to end open mic. Over to you, Mark.
Well, thank you, Cassandra, and thank you, Mary Jo, Charles, Kate, and Fred. And I think.
Excuse me, how do you sign up for the open mic?
You just come at the beginning and pop your name in the chat. Come next week. We'll put you on.
Gracias.
Or send us an email through the Facebook email thing. I'm just going to read what I think is kind of a good concluding poem to this wonderful evening, and it's called "After the Tea Party," and it comes from a collection that I'm working called "A Splash of Cave Paint." After the tea party. In the age of invisibility, we stride out toward the dawn, seeking all known forms, bakers, undertakers, chartered surveyors, citizens who punch holes, denizens of injection molders, the bipolar, the maladjusted, they who creep out under a faint lamplight, the drifters, sifters, layers of plankton, fungal spores, daily chores, stifled in the closet of the laundry room, tethered in the kitchen, the bed, the multiform, all these contours, unaccountably, punctually held in shape by years of that nautilus on a platform, pelagic, Jurassic, Cretaceous, Triassic, undeniably uniform. Thank you for a wonderful evening. Lots of love and poetry. See you next time. Adios.
Mwah. Love you,
Adios.
Lit Balm family.